You stopped asking for it out loud a while ago, not because it got better, because you got tired of hearing yourself say it, and tired of the look people give you when the same thing comes up again after all these years. So it went quiet. You still carry it every single day. You just carry it without a name now, the way you'd carry something in a pocket you never empty. Almost everyone has one. Almost nobody says what theirs is. Hold on to yours for a moment, because there is a man in the Gospels who had one too, and his was visible. He had been blind since birth. Not an accident, not an illness that arrived one year. Blind from the first day, sitting in the same spot he had sat in his entire life, close enough to the temple to hear it. People walked past him for decades. Some gave him something. Most just had opinions about whose fault it was. Then a man stops, spits in the dirt, makes clay with his own hands, puts it on the blind man's eyes, and tells him to go wash in a pool called Siloam. He goes. He washes. He comes back seeing. Everyone remembers the story up to that line. It gets told as a healing, and then the telling stops because as a healing it's finished. Man couldn't see, now he can. End of scene. But John didn't stop there. He gives the aftermath more room than the miracle, and by the end of it, Jesus isn't talking about eyes at all. And here is where the story stops behaving the way you were taught it behaves. Nobody celebrates. The neighbors stand around arguing over whether it's even the same man. The religious authorities haul him in and interrogate him twice. They call in his parents, and his parents, who have watched their son sit blind in the street his whole life, are so frightened of these men that they refuse to answer and hand the questioning back to him. And at the end of it, the one man in the city who can finally see is thrown out, expelled, the same day. That part almost never makes it into the sermon. He received his sight in the morning and lost everything else by evening. Jesus finds him afterward, outside where they had put him, and what he says to that man is not comfort, and it is not congratulations. He says he came into this world so that those who do not see would see, and so that those who see would become blind. The religious men standing nearby heard that and went cold, and they asked him a question, offended, almost daring him to say it plainly. "Are we blind too?" They asked it as an insult. Nobody standing in that courtyard was actually wondering, which is what makes it the most important question in the whole chapter, and the one almost nobody has asked about themselves since. 2,000 years of people reading that scene, and the question lands on the Pharisees every single time, never on the reader. You were taught to hear it as their embarrassment, not as an opening. So take it the way they refuse to. You have been working on this from the outside for years. The sleep, the diet, the job you finally left, the relationship you finally ended, the therapist, the discipline you held for 11 days before it collapsed. Every one of them made sense at the time. Some of them even helped, for a while. And underneath every single one, the thing is exactly where it was. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you would call a crisis. Just the same low weight that was there at 19 and at 30, and again, last Tuesday afternoon for no reason you could name. You already know this, chosen ones, and you have known it for a very long time. It does not live on the surface. You have had that suspicion for years quietly without proof. And you kept working the surface anyway. Not out of stubbornness, but because nobody ever showed you where else there was to work. That is not a flaw in you. That is what happens to a person handed a version of the cure that only knows how to treat the outside. The teachers who kept the older account did not work on the outside at all. They had a name for what is actually wrong with a human being, and it is not a word about the body. And once you've heard it, you will not be able to unhear it in your own life. Which brings us back to the man they threw into the street, and to something in that chapter almost nobody notices. Jesus never told him he was healed. Not once, not anywhere in it. What he said to him was something else entirely, and it lines up exactly with a sentence he said about himself, a sentence the church still repeats every year without ever hearing what he actually meant by it. He called himself a physician once, in the middle of an argument, and almost nobody notices what he did in the same breath. He was eating with the wrong people, tax collectors, the openly disreputable, and the religious men wanted to know why a teacher would sit at that table. His answer was one line: "The healthy have no need of a physician. Only the sick do." Read as a defense of his dinner guests. It's charming. Read as what it actually is, a physician stating his specialty. It stops being charming immediately, because he did not say the blind need a physician. He did not say the lame, the leprous, the feverish. He was surrounded by those people constantly. He named a completely different category, and he named it in a room where every single person present considered themselves well. So who did he think was sick? He answers that. Not in the Gospels the councils kept, in a text that spent 1,600 years under sand outside a town called Nag Hammadi, in a collection whose first line calls itself the secret words the living Jesus spoke. And there, he speaks in the first person, the way a physician speaks when he is writing something down. "I stood in the midst of the world, and I appeared to them in flesh. I found them all drunk. I found none of them thirsty. And my soul ached for the children of humanity, because they are blind in their hearts and do not see. For they came into the world empty, and they seek to leave the world empty." Read that again as what it actually is. That is not poetry, and it is not a lament. That is a clinical note. There is a presenting symptom, drunk, moving through a life without ever being fully awake inside it. There is the missing sign that would make treatment possible, not one of them thirsty. There is the underlying condition, stated plainly, blind in their hearts and unable to see that they are. And there is a prognosis in one devastating clause. They came into the world empty, and they intend to leave it exactly the same way. That is the disease he came for. And notice what the account does not say. It does not say people drifted into that state on their own, or that humanity simply got distracted over the centuries. The teachers who preserved this were explicit about it. The drunkenness is maintained. There are powers whose entire function is keeping the eyes of the heart closed, because a person who wakes up inside this world stops being useful to it. The Archons do not need you blind by accident. They need it on purpose, and they need it to look like your personality. And I want to be careful with you here, because this is where people take it too far. He is not saying your body doesn't matter, or that illness is imaginary, or that a person suffering in a hospital bed is suffering an illusion. He healed bodies. He touched them. He never once told anyone their pain wasn't real. He was never treating what they thought he was treating. Now return to the man at Siloam and watch the whole scene change shape. The eyes were never the point. They were the demonstration. He opened one pair of physical eyes in public in front of a crowd of people who could all see perfectly well. And the entire chapter afterward is those people proving, sentence by sentence, that they were blind in the exact way he had described. They interrogate a miracle. They frighten a family. They throw out the only man in the story who can now see anything at all. He healed the visible version of the disease so the invisible one would have to show itself. And it did, in under a day. Which is why his last line in that chapter is not about eyes. Those who do not see will see, and those who see will become blind. And there is one detail in the buried text that I need you to hear, chosen ones, because it is the only good news in the whole diagnosis. He said he found none of them thirsty. Nobody in the room wanting anything they couldn't name. If you are still here, this far in, if something in you has been thirsty for years without ever being able to say for what, then you are the exception he was looking for and did not find. That thirst is not your weakness. It has never been your weakness. It's the one symptom that means the condition is treatable in you, which leaves the only question that matters now, and it's the one nobody ever asks. If that was the disease, what exactly did he do about it? On a road outside Jericho, he asked a question that sounds almost cruel. A blind man was sitting at the roadside begging. The text even gives us his name, Bartimaeus, which it rarely bothers to do. He hears that Jesus is passing and starts shouting. The crowd tells him to be quiet. He shouts louder, and Jesus stops the entire procession and calls him over. The man throws off his cloak to get there. For a beggar, that cloak was the whole estate. Bedding, shelter, the thing he spread on the ground to catch coins. He leaves it in the dirt and comes. And Jesus, standing in front of a man who is visibly, unmistakably blind, asks him this: "What do you want me to do for you?" Taken flat, it makes no sense. It is obvious what he wants. Every person on that road can see what he wants. A physician who could restore sight with a word is asking a blind beggar to state his complaint out loud, unless the asking is part of the treatment, because the question does something no miracle can do. It forces a man to say, in his own voice, what he actually wants. And there is no guarantee the thing that comes out of his mouth will be the thing everyone standing there assumed. So do this tonight. It takes less than 10 minutes, and you need nothing to do it. Ask yourself, out loud, what do I want done for me? The first answer will be circumstance. Money, a diagnosis reversed, a person back, the job, the house, the year that went wrong. Say it out loud anyway. It's real, and pretending you're above it is its own kind of blindness. Then ask it again. Same words, no editing. The second answer usually drops a layer. To stop being afraid all the time, to not feel behind, to be able to rest without earning it first. Ask again. Somewhere around the fourth or the fifth, something changes. The answers stop being about your life and start being about you. That is the layer almost nobody reaches, for one reason only. Nobody asks twice. You've been answering that question with the first thing that surfaces since you were old enough to want anything. And when you get down there, what comes up will have no object attached to it. Not wanting a thing, just wanting, with nothing on the other end of it. That is the thirst. That is the one symptom he went looking for across the whole world and said he could not find. And it isn't vague, chosen ones, even though you've never had a word for it. That wanting has an object. It just isn't in this world, and that's the only reason it has never been satisfied by anything in it. What is thirsty in you is the part that didn't come from here. It has been asking to be recognized your entire life, and you kept handing it circumstances. One thing needs saying plainly, so you know what you're holding. The question is his, word for word, exactly as he put it to a man on that road. The repeating is mine. He only had to ask once, standing face to face with someone. You are doing this alone in a room, so you ask until it gets underneath the first answer. And that is the part that should tell you something. A treatment like this needs no temple, no schedule, no authority to certify that it worked, and nobody standing between you and the answer, which is exactly why it didn't survive. He was never treating what they thought he was treating, and what got kept for 2,000 years is what they thought. Nobody erased the healings. They were kept, retold, painted on ceilings, read aloud from pulpits every year, printed on the covers of books handed to children. What did not get kept was the diagnosis. Somebody chose which half to carry forward, and the choice makes sense the moment you ask who benefits. A miracle is useful to an institution. It proves authority. It draws a crowd. It creates a small class of people who dispense it, and a very large class who come asking. It keeps the sick arriving at the door. A diagnosis is useless to anyone who lives by administering the sick. It tells a person exactly what is wrong with them, and then tells them the treatment costs nothing, happens in private, and requires no one. So the miracle stayed at the center of the story, and the line where he says plainly what he was actually treating sat in a jar under the sand until a farmer broke it open in 1945. You were handed a wonder worker, chosen ones. What you were never handed was the physician. And notice how neatly that serves the older arrangement. A world that runs on people staying asleep does not need to burn anything. It only needs the version of the story that keeps you standing in line for a miracle, waiting for something external to arrive, which is exactly the posture the Archons have never once had to work around. And if a single diagnosis could be kept out of your hands that cleanly, the obvious question is, what else was? That is the map in the Archon Codex. What was kept, what was buried, and what each buried piece was actually for. It's available now, link in the description below, which leaves the last thing nobody tells you about seeing. The man at Siloam found it out within a day. In another town, he healed a blind man twice. They brought the man to him at Bethsaida, and the first thing he did was take him by the hand and walk him out of the village, away from the crowd that came with him. Then he touched his eyes and asked him a question no miracle worker would ask. "Do you see anything?" And the man said yes, but wrong. "I see people. They look like trees walking around. Half sight, shapes without edges, enough to know something had changed and not enough to live by." So Jesus put his hands on him a second time, and only then did the man see everything clearly. That detail was left in the text for a reason, and almost nobody preaches it because it makes the miracle look incomplete. It isn't incomplete, it's honest. Sight does not arrive finished. So when you ask yourself that question tonight, and what surfaces is blurry, a wanting with no shape to it, something you can feel and cannot name, do not throw it out as a failure. Trees walking is what the first look actually looks like. The text says so. And understand what it costs, chosen ones, because you should know before you start. The man at Siloam received his sight in the morning and was thrown into the street by evening. Everyone who could see nothing kept their place. He was the only one in the city with open eyes, and he ended the day outside. That is the price, and it has never changed. What changes is that you stop being drunk in a room full of people who are, and you stop treating a condition you never had. He said he found no one thirsty. Let him be wrong about that tonight. If this reached you, say so. Comment, "I'm thirsty."